the employees of that office. So, Honorable Koech, and the country was shocked to learn about the high number of employees at the office of the Deputy President, 108 of them. They were called supernumeracy. I think that was the term that was used, meaning these are people that are working beyond the numbers that ordinarily would apply to the public service. What does that say about how big our workforce is for state offices?
And I go back to a statement that had been made by Honorable Moses Kuria some time back on this country and the wage bill that we foot. It's exponentially, it's very high. Mm-hmm. And I looked at the people who had been let go by the head of public service from mm-hmm. the office of the Deputy President. And it begs questions. Do we really deserve, does it need all this stuff? Do you need advisors, for instance, of all sorts and kind of manner? You need an advisor for political, an advisor, food advisor, I don't know what. I mean, 108, that is huge. A country that is, reeling from youth unemployment mm-hmm. and all sorts of unemployment should not, I don't think it was fair for the Deputy President to have such a huge number of hangers-on, if I would say.
How do they determine how many an office needs in the cadre?
I think it's a moral question that you've asked, Sam. It's honestly, why? For instance, I see even on issues of security that we've talked about, why will someone have 100 security, for instance? And I think it's myself and Honorable Manzo. I hardly have any security because what will they be doing? Protect me from what? And what happens to the rest of the public?
But you appreciate that the office of the Deputy President is, it's a high-risk office.
A reasonable numbers of security. Okay. What threat is there for a Deputy President? Let's be honest.
Do you know how many people work at the office of the President?
I don't know. I wouldn't know, but I'm certain. You remember, after the Gen Z demonstration,
yep.
the President himself made it very deliberate that he did not need any advisors, and he let off most of his advisors. He actually fired most of his advisors, number one. Number two...
Who was let go?
He usually cut, I don't know the names, I wouldn't say the names.
But you said most of them were let go.
In a statement that he made himself after the demonstration by the Gen Z, he said that he had let go of all the advisors, not just for his office, but for all other government offices. And even asked the ministers that if they needed advisors, they only keep one. Cabinet Secretary.
They're allowed they were to keep one because the reduction was 50%.
Yes, 50%.
So at the office of the President, how many left, if you know?
I'm not sure. But we must also appreciate that the President's office is a huge office with so many functions, and the role of the Deputy President then cannot be as equal to that of the President. So in effect, it means that his number should be lower than that of the President.
Unfortunately, we don't know how many work at the office of the President because you also say so. But you recall that new advisors were actually hired, including Moses Kuria.
Mm. Yeah, but look at if he reduced 50% of his workforce and have 2 or 3 or 4 advisors, then I think that is an
all right. Honorable Njeri, talk to us about that number. It looks so bloated because, very many people carry the title of advisor. How do you even have time to listen to 108 people, majority of whom are advisors?
I think in that regard, I can agree with my colleague that we've discussed several times that we need to downsize wastage of public resources. However, I just want to clarify, I think it's not in order to try to paint the Deputy President's office in bad light in regard to the view that, and the fact that we do not know how many staff work at State House. Mm-hmm. I presume there would be twice the number. And of course, it is in the public domain that the State has actually hired some other advisors to the President, Moses Kuria and the likes. And we really do not have the number of how many are currently working there. But in general, the generality of it is that it is a fact that even at the county level, there's wastage of public resources, duplication of roles in government, state corporations that are defunct and no longer even viable for government to retain or continue investing in. And we need to look at these issues so that we can lessen the burden for the Kenyan taxpayer. In the same breath, let me just bring us up to speed. I had asked my colleagues in the Senate, and I'm glad Senator Manzo is here, on what they were relying on in regard to the timeline indications. And Senate Standing Order 74, as read with 73, it provides 10 days. So basically, the timeline is the same as what is in the Constitution of Kenya. So Senate did have time. They would have accorded extra time to the Deputy President, even in regard, even with the assumption that they were working with 10 days. They just refused and denied him a fair hearing.
Okay, interesting. I'm just looking at the, should I call it litany, of the workers at the office of the Deputy President. So you have positions of Deputy Director, Assistant Director, Under Secretary, quite a lot. A Senior Deputy Secretary, Deputy Director, Administrative Services, Director, Program Management. Senator Manzo, yes. What do you think of this? Because, these are, just to be fair, these are Kenyans. They have families, and an impeachment motion has meant that they're out of work. But also, at the inception of these offices, what considerations must be put into account so that you don't end up with bloated that yet maybe it's not even effective?
First, I'm looking at these particular persons have been hired by Public Service Commission, and then they have been posted to the office of the Deputy President to do various roles. I believe the team in the President's office is much bigger. Mm-hmm. And as I said earlier, the practice has been that since 2013, we've been having a core presidency situation. Mm-hmm. In fact, if it was not for President Ruto, then President Uhuru Kenyatta would never have been elected. And similarly, if it was not for Rigathi Gachagua, then Ruto would never have been elected. So they've been having a co-presidency sort of a situation whereby the president and the deputy, although the constitution claims one is the principal assistant of the other, they are so conjoined that one cannot exist without the other politically. And I was wondering, with all this number of staff, I believe, and it's a huge office. There is an office in Karen, the resident which is also serves as an office, and the office in town. Mm-hmm. The one they say now these employees have not been allowed to get in is such a huge office. So probably this number everybody could easily be busy doing something. But the whole idea of political assistants and the political advisors, I think that one has gone way off beyond even the president's office. Most of these people have not been useful at all. I believe a very experienced politician like the president needs very little advice from some characters we know. They are likely to mislead him more. And I believe, because you have a cabinet, and I believe that's why the country has been making a lot of mistakes in a lot of situations. And similarly now with the Deputy President's office. Now, you remember one time there was an issue of the office of the First Lady and office of the Second Lady. And when it was said to be an unnecessary expense, right, and there was a need to remove their budget, they quickly said these employees are on contract and therefore cannot be sacked. Now, as soon as there are proceedings to impeach the Deputy President, or in the mind of the government, they have already impeached him, while the court is yet to determine, they have already sacked or sent on compulsory leave all these people who are hired by Public Service Commission. So what do you do with their contract? Are you then going to pay them off? What are you going to do? You are rendering them jobless. The hate shown against the Deputy President should not be transferred to innocent employees. What happened to him was a political move, which may not have followed the law. The same should not be applied. Right. You should also not impeach the employees who are government employees and who have been transferred from different ministries to go and serve in the Deputy President office. So I think that decision was wrong. It should also be challenged in court. They should get employment lawyers and sue the government and stop this leave, which is seemingly unlawful, so that they could have their rights, protect their employment rights. I believe have been abused. And I believe the government should be there to serve everybody without discrimination and without extending the malice shown to the Deputy President to employees who have been serving him.
Just out of curiosity, so these officers, 108 of them, again, supernumeracy contracts, if there's change of occupancy in that office, does it mean they cease to hold these offices and new ones have to be hired? Is the advice specific to the person in office?
I think the advice is to an office. And I believe when there is a new Deputy President, if that's going to happen, then chances are high that they are going now to look for other employees, probably within the civil service, or give other people contracts and hire people. Out of what the Deputy President was talking about, those are very sensitive offices. And a lot of times the people who work for the President or Deputy President, including a cook or even a dry cleaner, they must be, cleared security-wise. Because a lot of times, mischief can be played, and the life of such persons are so important in a nation that they must be protected. And that's why sometimes they are given a leeway, so that you have security who you have vetted, you have cooks who you have vetted, you have cleaners who you have vetted, and that sort of thing. That's why you find a lot of times in these offices, other than quite a few professionals, you find the people who've been hired for a specific person, and the Deputy President himself has vetted or checked, and allowed certain people to work for them for their own security, first and foremost.
Okay.
But the moment you have that contract, I don't think this is a way to terminate it. I believe the same should be transferred to different places, those who are not liked. And the ones the new Deputy President will also pull them from the people who have already been employed. But having a new Deputy President does not mean you hire another 108 people unnecessarily. They should be pulled from people already hired within the civil service.
Okay. And it's important to also state here that some of the officers, of course, they appear like, they're quite essential, because you're talking about hospitality management at the current office. You'll find there's communication function, there's office administrative services, and anyway, we'll wait to see what happens in regards to that. But in a situation such as this, I know you're not an expert on employment law, but in a situation where the hold of the office has been removed through a constitutional process, what should happen to the terms of engagement or the terms of contract for an officer in such a situation who had been given a 5-year contract, but now the person you're advising, for instance, is no longer in office?
I will look at it this way. What happens in a situation where an election has been done in such an office, new office holders have come in, and your term of duty is still on? It's a very difficult situation, if you asked me. But I think, like Honorable Mamzo is saying, it's a very sensitive office that you will want people that you have confidence in, that you trust can deliver. Nonetheless, they are all Kenyans. I do not know why we also must select. I will tell you that this office of the Deputy President, the former Chief of Staff who came before my committee, was hounded out. And I think on the request of the Deputy President that he did not want to work with him. And he was nominated for an ambassadorial position, an exceptional ambassador. He's called Makogoya, very brilliant fellow. I think probably his sin, we will later know what probably was his sin, but I'm told that when he will speak, people will get to understand the kind of distress sometimes.
But he had been hired by Gachagua.
Government.
No.
The communication came while Gachagua was in office.
Yes.
Who hired him?
I don't know. That's why I'm saying he was serving as a public servant. That's why I'm saying I'm actually building a point that sometimes the people in public service space go through a lot, particularly when you're subjected to boss who do not somehow agree with you are thinking. And it goes to the counties as well. So I think we have to look at how we hire individuals. Not even just, and I'm not accusing the Deputy President alone, even we as members of Parliament. Because I remember even when I joined Parliament in 2017, many were asking me to let go of the staff that I found in the office that belonged to my predecessor. But I didn't see the reason why.
Okay.
Because
that is interesting, an interesting area.
But many members of Parliament,
yeah,
immediately they assume office, will send staff who are employed by the previous member of Parliament. That's what happens.
You know, you said something interesting, because I remember communication coming from the office of the Deputy President saying the following officers have been seconded or hired to that office, and Makoe was one of them.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, when you say that it's not him, then who?
No, but he was dismissed very quickly. Yeah. In fact, actually, Makoe was to go home.
Who hires for that office?
It shall be the Public Service Commission.
In consultation with the
Public Service Commission, and that is why even the letter that was written to them was from the head of Public Service.
But in consultation with the office holder? Can you hire a chief of staff for the president if he doesn't want them?
You can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think some maybe, and in all fairness, maybe perhaps what we have not brought to light is that sometimes you have provision for parts and staff. Like Koech has said that you cannot hire a chief of staff for the president, and the president is not amenable to the same, because some of these positions are very sensitive. Something like hospitality is a very sensitive also position, that perhaps maybe if I were to get into office, presuming that there were an existing staffer in the same level, I would not feel comfortable knowing that maybe perhaps the predecessor of that office is not someone that we get along with in terms of politics and all that. So what I know is that quite a number of those contracts will be challenged legally, and it is a viable challenge, because majority of them, like director in maybe in regard to relations with the functions of a deputy president with county governments. You know, there are things that certain staff could have been retained, and certain staff, unfortunately, the partisan staff, I don't think it would be tenable even before a court of law to say that, in all fairness, they would be retained by the office of the deputy president.
Okay, all right. Now, I want us to touch on something that is just about to come to the courts. And I saw a letter from Jindo Matiba law firm talking about how